first decade of the 21st century is over. Some are already calling this decade the worst in recent American history because of what happened each year. I will speak about certain events that happened during each year of the decade. Once you, the viewer, is done watching this video, I want you to reflect on it as you remember this question. Was this decade, the year 2000 through 2009, the savage time? In the year 2000, we would basically deal with a problem that was left over from the 90s, the whole Y2K epidemic, the millennium bug. See, Y2K was a common abbreviation for the year 2000 problem. You know, the abbreviation was Y for year, K was the Greek variation, fixation, a prefix for kilo, meaning 1,000, hence 2K, 2000. You see, the Y2K, I remember that. A lot of us, you know, who are in our mid-20s and older, remember that because around the end of the decade, we were all worried that our computers would effectively shut off, be broken, useless, because the computers at the time could not comprehend the turning from 1999 to 2000. The fear was that when the year 1999 ended, it would reset and go back to the year 1900 instead of 2000, that the machines, the computers could not cope. And at the time, we were all worried that our changing society, our dependence on machines would mean that we will basically revert back to the 1700s where machines weren't around and we actually had to do things for a living. So the thing was is that some people took this so seriously is that I remember seeing all these news documentaries and reports about people who would literally quit their job, they would run up their debt and do whatever they wanted because they thought that the whole world would collapse and that we would all revert to a nomadic state. Credit would be useless, money would be useless because we couldn't print any, because at the time we were starting to convert to printing with computers instead of printing with a printing press and all of that. So what happened in when it became the year 2000, nothing happened. The lights didn't go out, the machines didn't go off, governments didn't collapse, the world did not end. Everything was fine. So those people who basically moved their families to the most distant parts of their countries, they would basically sit in the cellars, they stockpiled food for who knows how long. Basically said, "Aw, damn." And that's how it goes. That was the first instance of the human race, all of us becoming so dependent on machines that we would actually be worried about what would happen after that. September 11th, at 8:46 a.m., American Airlines Flight 11 crashed into the World Trade Center's North Tower, followed by United Airlines Flight 175, which hit the South Tower at 9:03 a.m. Another group of hijackers flew American Airlines Flight 77 into the Pentagon at 9:37 a.m. A fourth flight, United Airlines Flight 93, crashed near Shanksville, Pennsylvania at 10:03 a.m. after the passengers on board fought to reclaim the aircraft from the hijackers. It's thought that the ultimate target was to either be Washington, D.C. or the White House. There's actually way too much to discuss about September 11th just for this one video alone. This is why I really recommend that you view my special 5-part episode of The Shadow Parliament called September 11th Day of Death. It's long, but I guarantee it's worth your time to watch. However, the attacks of September 11th would not be the only thing that would happen in the month of September in the year 2001. predominant officials would actually get strange letters in the mail. These letters looked just like any other, but upon closer inspection, a few post carriers would actually notice that there was this powdery residue on the letter. Upon government testing, it was actually discovered that the so-called powdery residue was actually a chemical agent called anthrax, a very dangerous disease which in some cases can actually kill people. This would actually cause a small panic within our country due to the fact that someone could mail a letter and send it to another part of the country, and for a time the people thought that you could not find the person who did this due to the fact that once you put a letter into the mailbox, it would be sent along its way, and basically you could not track it to where it came from. A person was caught, and sadly there were some people who died from contacting the spores when they opened the letters or even handled it. But as a result of the terror attacks on September 11th, these anthrax attacks would actually go with arguably less attention than the terror attacks itself. One year after the attacks of September 11th, the United States of America invaded Afghanistan in an attempt to overthrow the Taliban-controlled government of the country. If you want to know more, be sure to watch my video, The Sad Truth of Iraq and Afghanistan. On March 20th, Iraq is invaded. On February 15, 2003, a month before the invasion, there were many worldwide protests against the Iraq War, including a rally of 3 million people in Rome, which is listed in the Guinness Book of World Records as the largest ever anti-war rally. The idea was at the time that the Bush administration was trying to convince people that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, and this was justification for the United States invading the country and toppling the government. But as we all know, there was no such weapons of mass destruction within the country. Some say that the reason why we went there was for the oil deposits within the country. Others say that the reason why Bush wanted to go to Iraq so eagerly was to basically fix the mistake of his father, the previous Bush, in the fact that during the first Gulf War, the United States abruptly left the country, leaving Saddam in power, and the second Bush wanted to help his father by fixing the mistake that he left Saddam in power. I call the year 2004 the worst year of the decade, mostly because of two events that happened during that year. Now, we're going to talk about one of them first. Basically, in the year 2004, there was the Abu Ghraib prison scandal. That basically showed the world how we treat our prisoners in Iraq. I remember when that story broke, and there was a whole lot of scandal because before that point, we really did not know what our soldiers actually did in Iraq. We just thought that they went on patrols, shot some terrorists, and went back to the base and just sat there. We did not know that at this prison in Baghdad that these kind of things were going on, and that one of the soldiers, the Lindy England, was actually parading. It's actually a well-known photo that she's actually like holding a man with a leash, and it just it's very sad because I remember hearing about all these kinds of things about like torture, rape, sodomy. Some of the prisoners basically forced to stand in the nude for hours. Other ones, they were being exposed to loud noises, sleep deprived, not being able to sleep, starvation, and other incidents like that. And the reason why it was so much of a scandal was because basically we did not think our soldiers would actually do that. And it was actually a failure of leadership. Some people blame Bush because, you know, basically some people thought that Bush told people, do what you want. We're not going to actually follow up on what you do. We're not going to monitor what you do. We're not going to keep tabs on you. Basically, do whatever you want, but keep it quiet. But these photos were leaked, and the whole world saw it. And a lot of people thought we were being hypocrites due to the fact that, you know, in the United States, we don't do these kinds of things. And for evidence and footage, proof that we actually have done these things and can probably continue to do these things, it goes against our image as a peaceful country and the fact that we treat prisoners with respect. True, some terrorists have done bad things to this country, but we will not sink to their level and do things that they do out of revenge. We have justice, we have law, we have respect. But in that instance, it was not there, it was not shown, and it was not displayed. Now, I actually remember hearing about some of the soldiers actually being convicted of crimes, but some would say that it wasn't good enough, and the fact that I don't think any of them were reprimanded, but if they were, they probably deserved it. And I think the prison is still around now, but it just goes to show that it's an ugly blemish on the Iraq conflict that we were in, and that's how things were. And in a way, that's how things still are in Iraq. It's very sad, very sad. The second thing that happened in 2004 was the re-election of George W. Bush as our president. Now, a lot of people were angry with that, including myself, because I actually voted for the Democratic nominee, John Kerry. And I remember when Bush got re-elected again, there was so much anger in this country due to the fact that from the time he was elected until 2004, the people were slowly thinking, getting the impression that George Bush was not the best president for the country, and the fact that he was leading us down a wrong path, and that we really thought that John Kerry would win. And I remember when he got the nomination, and people were watching in the street, and some people were actually shouting, you know, like obscenities, like "damn you, Bush," "fuck you, Bush," "I hate you, Bush," all these bad comments about him. And when he actually got re-elected, that was really bad, due to the fact that at the time, we thought it couldn't get any worse. We thought that, oh my God, we hit rock bottom. And when Bush got re-elected, the morale in this country just sunk. People were actually wondering, how could Bush get re-elected again with what he had done? And like a lot of people put the blame on the Republicans due to the fact that Bush heavily, how should I say it, he basically dogged, he played obedient to the Republican base, the Republican Party. It's like a real old political party, and Bush basically played to them and said, I know it's bad, but if you elect me again, I promise I'll make it better. And as we all know, he didn't. And I remember also, after he got re-elected, some people were so fed up that they actually moved out of the country. There was a small report on the news saying that people were actually moving to Canada due to the fact that they had enough of Bush. And I remember, like, you know, when it was all said and done, we basically had to deal with Bush for another 4 years. And I remember, like, a few years later, people were actually considering impeaching him, but in the end, we just decided just to let him sit in the presidency and wait till the next president would be elected. Then Bush would finally be out of the White House. And when Bush was finally out of the White House, like when Barack Obama was elected, people were dancing in the street. People were waving pictures of Barack Obama. People were saying, Barack Obama, 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 yes we can. And it just goes to show that we were so sick and tired of George W. Bush. And it just shows that we don't impeach presidents anymore. We just let them sit there and wait till the term is over. In 2005, we had the worst environmental disaster in American history, Hurricane Katrina. Now, it's extremely sad, the whole thing. Now, on August 29th, the Hurricane Katrina slammed into the Gulf Coast. You know, it slammed into New Orleans, causing an extraordinary amount of damage. You see, much of the city was underwater, like 10 feet. Another way of thinking about it is average one-floor home up to the roof. You know, I remember hearing all these reports, like these rampant, you know, sayings about rape, looting, crime, because in New Orleans, there was suddenly no law. It's like people did whatever they want and that was it. It's like anarchy ensued. And it was crazy because what happened there, and some people just couldn't believe that such a thing could happen here in America. I remember some people in the Middle East saying that this was basically punishment from God due to the fact that we invaded Iraq. This was just a sweet revenge. And, you know, when the National Guard finally went into the city to secure it days later, people were basically pointing their fingers everywhere and pointing and saying, whose fault is it? And, like, one reason was that it was the levees, basically these dams that keep out water, because New Orleans gets flooded every so often, but these weren't maintained because of gross negligence, people being lazy and bureaucratic nonsense. Another reason was the fact that Bush, you know, being so dumb, he didn't tell the National Guard to go down there. He just waited for a few days, then he said, okay, go. And that another reason was that our forces were stretched thin, and the fact that our soldiers were in Iraq, so we were kind of short-handed over here in the home front. So even though they were needed here, we didn't have enough men and women to go and help. Now, another reason is that it was FEMA's fault and that they were incompetent of doing anything. And another reason, a really controversial reason, was that it was a racially motivated incident, because most of the people that got out were even people, and the fact that most that were left were poor Africans, and basically the government, some people say, just let them suffer, they're black, who cares? And it's real sad. Now, a final reason, a sixth reason, is that the Gulf Coast has basically people who leave when there's storms all the time, and some don't go even though they're asked to. So when Hurricane Katrina hit, there was more people than average due to the fact that they did not go. And so that's why there was even more people to worry about when the hurricane came. Now, the saddest thing of all is that in the year 2009, nearly 5 years later, there's still some parts of New Orleans that are still broken and messed up. You know? It's like Jeremy Clark said it best that, the United States, the strongest country in the world, could just let something like that happen and just ignore it. Basically ignore it. And that's just unfathomable. Saddam Hussein is executed. The United States government actually invites a few Iraqi reporters to the site of the proposed execution. But soon word gets out and other Iraqi reporters as well as civilians come to the site. They actually record his death by hanging on their cell phones, and some actually view his death as him being a martyr rather than a tyrant, in the fact that he was executed by an invading foreign power. The first baby boomer files for online Social Security benefits. It's estimated that a baby boomer will retire from the American labor force every second for the next 20 years. Some say that the boomers will actually become a source of burden for future generations due to the fact that the Social Security income is expected to run out even before half of the generation retires. Some analysts actually predict that future generations might not be able to retire due to the fact that any Social Security income that they make would automatically be put toward the boomers' possible care. Now, of course, some boomers are going to hold on to their jobs and income longer than they could or should, which means basically in the fact that the method of progression in this country is going to be halted. Now, when a person gets old, they retire, they go away. When a generation gets old, they go away too. Now, with the boomers trying to stay around longer and hold on to power and influence as long as they could, this will cause even more problems. It's been said that the financial crisis and later the global economic crisis began in this year. Now, it's actually pretty complicated, even by Parliament standards. Well, an easy way of saying it, a short explanation, is that the housing market, in which people buy homes, was getting bad loans. Given to them by bankers who actually knew that they could not repay the loan that they were given. But when a buyer defaulted on the loan, the bank would repossess the home. And but wasn't counted on in the fact that our American economy is so integrated that the problems in the housing market would actually seep into other areas of the economy. So without people not being able to pay for their home, for example, they were forced to foreclose. This would mean naturally that they would lose their job. No job means no income. No income means no money to spend. No buying or spending. That means demand is less. Less demand, the economy slows. And when our economy slows, the world's economy slows. So I would suggest that you see the episode Damn You Recession that talks about this whole concept in more detail. From August 8th through the 28th, the Beijing Olympic Games was held in China. The Chinese were very eager to display their newfound strength, power, and influence. And there is no doubt, it is a no-brainer that China will be a major force to contend with in the 21st century. Now, as of late, we've seen the European Union, we've seen America, Canada, Australia, basically every country in the world that has diplomatic rights, they're cozying up to China because we all know that China will be a major power to deal with. They'll be a superpower. They're already a superpower, it's just that only now China is reawakening and actually throwing its influence around. It's actually expected that they will once again be the political dominant force in Asia, when for the past 50 years America has been. Now here in America, we're not one to share power. We like to be the best. We don't like to be number two. But China has all of our debt, which is a source of tension. Now, at the Olympic Games, China got the most gold medals, but they placed second behind us. You might say, what's the point? It's also due to the fact that China is not just a backwater country anymore. They are very sophisticated, but at the same time, China is still behind on human rights and all these kinds of things like Tibet, Xinjiang, relations with the West, and it's all a source of tension. And with the fact that the Chinese, they will no longer be pushed around by foreign powers anymore. Now, a lot of Chinese, I know, they're very proud of the country, but at the same time, that pride comes with a price. Now, it's actually a lot to discuss, so I would suggest that you watch my episode, 60 Years of Communism in China. It discusses the Communist Party in China and issues like that. Because at the moment, China is still communist. For now. In 2009, we would also see an increased threat from North Korea, which, as some would say, is growing more politically unstable due to the possible rumors of the failing health of the dictator Kim Jong-il. Supposedly, North Korea has wide-range ballistic missiles, nuclear or otherwise, which could possibly endanger South Korea and Japan. The North Koreans even will go as far as saying that they have missiles capable of reaching the Hawaiian Islands, thus putting the United States at risk. If this was a nuclear attack, possibly, there would be no warning. The only way we would actually know that we were attacked is after the missiles hit, which is actually quite scary if you live in America, South Korea, or Japan. In December, the leaders of the world would meet in Copenhagen, Denmark, for a summit on climate change. Climate change is a nicer way of saying global warming, an issue that not only threatens the United States, but the whole world as well. The leaders of the world would come to the summit to discuss the issue of climate change. And a lot of people were thinking that with all the leaders of the world, all the high dignitaries that would attend, that there would be some kind of agreement drafted, some kind of arrangement would be done. But as we all know, that was not the case. Almost immediately there would be accusations by the developing and poor countries of the world that the whole reason why we're in this mess is because when the developed countries modernized around 100 years ago, they were the ones that pumped all the carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and they're the ones that caused the mess that we're forced to deal with now. And basically, the developing countries, mostly Brazil, India, and China, are arguing that if they want to develop in an environmentally friendly manner, that the developed countries would basically have to foot the bill. The developed countries said, all right, sure, we'll think about it. When the whole budget is estimated to be around $100 billion to basically pay for the developing world to develop in a fashionable and correct manner. It's also interesting to note that here in the United States, our annual war budget is around $150 million. So technically, theoretically, we could pay for the entire developing world's budget for them to develop in a more friendly and stable manner. But we won't do it because it's not in our interest. Now, nothing was actually done at the summit, which made some people disappointed. And sadly, some of the Pacific island nations are made the biggest pleas due to the fact that if global warming happens and the whole ocean levels rise, their nations could possibly disappear beneath the waves. Entire countries could be destroyed as a result of this. But there was no ironclad agreement done at this summit. Basically, leaders would quote-unquote make references of the discussions and ideas presented at this time. It's very sad because global warming is a problem that affects the world, and future generations might look back on this day and be quite angry because a lot of chaos and problems could have been prevented, but it wasn't. I do not want to sound like the bearer of bad news by only focusing on the sad events of that decade, but I thought it would be important to make a record of it. Most of what happened, the events I spoke of, have already been forgotten by most Americans. I wanted to try and change that so you, the viewer of these parts of this special episode, may remember. In the end, all we can do is just hope for better times. It's just human nature to forget and repeat our mistakes.